Hello, everybody. So for the moment, I am just with the two experts of the day for the webinar number 3 of the PEPR O2R, so organic robotics. And it's about the webinar presented by two members of the Structuring Research Action AS3, Decision Learning and Social Interaction. So I let Lionel Obadia and Ganesh
Gowrishankar.
Sorry?
It's a bit long. Gowrishankar, yeah, don't worry.
Gowrishankar to introduce themselves. Yeah. So please.
Okay, Ganesh, please go first.
Thank you, Lionel. So welcome to this talk, and thank you for being here. But yes,
okay.
So I think this was a talk that originated from a few emails that we had between Lionel and myself. We wanted to initially talk about anxiety and trust during human-machine interaction, especially interaction with robots. That was the initial idea. But when we talked a bit, I was quite surprised. Even with a few emails, we converged on some interesting questions and issues that we thought would be very interesting to discuss between our fields. So anthropology and also neuroscience and engineering that we do. So basically, the point was to understand how we perceive. Why is it moving? Yeah, how we perceive robots. So and usually the perception of robots leads to some emotions, and this is usually determined by how the robot looks and how it behaves. And in engineering, and for a long time, it is believed that well, of course, the looks and the behavior instigates some emotions, but there is this feeling that the robot has to behave in a proper way, or in some particular way which is good for humans. And usually there sometimes there is this tendency to think that they have to be human like. So we started discussing about this and discussing how should a robot behave, and how should it behave, and is there something optimal, and if there should be something optimal or not. So should there be an optimal? So to talk about that, what I thought about today was to go back a bit. Actually, emotions are also a bit new for me. So I said, why not try to make uh, a kind of understanding of emotions from different perspectives. So what I wanted to look at was, first of all, so we are interested in emotions and emotions of humans when they interact with humans, with robots, sorry. But what are emotions, and why do they exist, and how they are measured? So basically, these are questions which are actually divided in terms of the domain, because neuroscience has always looked at what are emotions, psychology as why do they exist, and engineering as to how they are measured. So I just wanted to make a brief summary of what these fields say about emotions, and then we come to today's discussion, which is more about so what for robots. And this is more towards what Lionel will talk about, and also trying, and we'll try to discuss this in terms of also anthropology. Okay, so I start with the what, which is the neuroscience of emotions, and basically what mechanisms enable emotions. So this is something that has been discussed for a long time in neuroscience, and it's kind of started in the late 20th century, where initially James and Lang, so this is William James, famous philosopher, they started thinking about why emotions, what are emotions, how are they generated. And the first idea they had was that they are actually emotions are actually generated by ANS. ANS here is the auxiliary autonomous neural system, nervous system. Sorry. So the idea they had was, emotions are generated basically from physical cues. So when you see a snake, you feel the fear in terms of, I don't know, your hair rising and you feeling some perspiration, and this is what generates emotions in your brain. So it's a one-way process where external cues lead to the feeling of emotion emotion in your brain. This, of course, we know that it's not very true at the moment, but this was the first idea that they had. And later in the 1930s, there was the second generation of thought where people started, like with Cannon and Bard, they started saying that, this is true, but it's not really the ANS that leads to emotion, but ANS is activated and emotion are activated together. So they are somehow happening in parallel, where some stimulus like the snake would lead to some autonomous nervous system behavior, like you tremble, your hair stand up. At the same time, they also lead to some emotions in the brain, which are more probably cognitive. So this was updated in the 1960s, where a new theory came in, where people started saying, okay, emotion is something that is coming afterwards. It's not directly coming from the stimulus, and it passes through this filter, which has both the ANS and the cognitive appraisal. So, in a sentence, how this can be said is that if I suppose I'm trembling because I'm scared. So basically, what it means is that when you see the snake, then you have the autonomous system responding, but you also have the cognitive system that is responding to this, which may be from your probably of previous memory of the snake, for example, and the two together somehow interact and give emotion. So this is actually very close to what people believe now. And there was in between also a separate theory from Lazarus, which basically believed that everything actually can be explained by cognitive appraisal. I mean, there is ANS is not required to explain emotions, but this somehow has been disproved, because we can have, for example, drugs. So you have psychedelic drugs, for example, or drugs that which are for calming the muscles after for example, if you have a muscle spasm, and this lead to also a feeling of calmness, even though it's just a very physical stimulation that you give with a drug on the muscles. So this, we know that it's not true, but this was also another parallel suggestion that was given in the 1980s. So the contemporary belief is somehow a mix of all this. So what is believed is somehow that emotions are generated by cues, which lead to not just activation of the autonomous nervous system, but also there is some cognitive appraisal. There is actually a lot of cognitive part where you think actually quite a bit before the emotions are generated. So this is the general belief that is there now. And all of this neuroscience, what it's also interested in is to understand where it happens in the brain. And it is very well accepted that all of this, whatever is happening, however this information is combined from the autonomous nervous system, from the cognition, but it's happening in the amygdala, which is a small part in the limbic, in the central brain. And there are many studies to see exactly which part of the amygdala. So on the right side, I give the various parts of the amygdala, how various parts are involved, how the information is being transferred from the amygdala with the prefrontal cortex, with the thalamus, with the other parts of the brain. But it is generally agreed that amygdala is the key. So the what neuroscience part of the emotion is that it is happening because of stimulus, because of there is some cognition, because there is some stimulation of the autonomous nervous system, which all comes to the amygdala to give the emotion. And then there is maybe today I will not go too much into it. The video is there and people can have a look. There has been a lot of studies to see when these emotions come up in a child over the time. It can be correlated with the development of the brain and also his cognitive abilities, or a child's cognitive abilities. Okay, so the why. So psychology, on the other hand, has always looked at why do we have emotions? Why are they required? So it's generally believed that emotions are a precursor. They come from reflexes. The reflexes are a precursor of emotions. And basically, what psychology believes is that to survive, you require what are called adaptations. So in psychology, what adaptation means basic behaviors that let you have some abilities, like abilities to find food, water, shelter, and so on and so forth. And it is believed that each adaptation requires the activation of sequence of programs in quotes. So programs can be like, perceptual mechanisms, increase of attention. You can have programs about, where you make, and as an animal, you will make some vocal calls, which is for communication, expression, and so on and so forth. And the belief is why you have emotions are that basically emotions have evolved as a superordinate mechanism that regulate the programs, and these are called emotions. So what does it mean? It means that, for example, if you observe a predator, so the programs that you have to activate when you observe a predator in nature is that you need to upregulate the attention. You have to be more attentive. You need to downregulate your sexual urges. So if you're looking for a partner, you have to give it up for the moment. You need to downregulate your effort optimization. So effort is something very crucial in the brain. In all our behaviors, we always try to minimize the energy requirement. But when it comes to this kind of, when you observe a predator, you need to downregulate this automatic optimization, and you need to downregulate brain sensation, and so on and so forth. And what psychology believes is that all this this set of programs together is kind of a mechanism which leads to fear, and this is what you perceive as fear. So basically, the emotion is your perception of this superordinate mechanism, which includes all these coming together, all these the programs coming together. So, for example, another example maybe, if you lose in sport. So when you have a loss in sports, you lose your match. Then there's you upregulate the memory of previous losses, downregulate attention, upregulate effort optimization, and so on and so forth. And this leads to sadness. So this is how psychology sees it. And all these emotions are context dependent, and the same cues can lead to different programs depending on the scenarios. So psychology sees this as as emotions as being, the consequence of this kind of or a representation of a set of programs that you've learned in real life. And also, there is also a belief that another reason that you have emotions is to signal to others. So, for example, especially the basic emotions like disgust, fear, and anger, you always have them also as a mechanism for the survival of the species. So, for example, when the deer sees a lion in a herd, if one deer sees a lion, he would be afraid and he would make calls like the calls which represent fright, and this would give information for the other deers to be afraid as well, and they would also activate their specific programs to evade the predator, and so on and so forth. So basically, the idea is that the emotion, why they evolved, it's like it's a mechanism for improving the survival of the species as a whole. But this actually is not completely true, especially for what are called social emotions, because all emotions are not really visible outside. So, for example, especially in social emotions like envy and pride, in fact, sometimes the benefit is in not showing the emotions outside, for hiding it. So even if when you have it, you don't want to show it. So even though signaling was one of the key ideas that has been there for the reason why you have emotions, recently it's believed that it depends. Emotions, some of them may be really important for signaling, others not. So. And finally, the engineering part of it. So how we measure emotions. So this is kind of generally accepted. We recently, the most popular way of measuring emotions is using this kind of a three-dimensional scale, which uses valence, arousal, and dominance. And this has been quite prevalent in engineering, and there are modifications of this scale to see if others fit better, but in general it's some version of this three-dimensional scale. Okay, so from there I come back to what we started with, as in so when it comes to the interactions between humans and machines, um, what do we understand? So from all this, what we understand is, first of all, emotions are not reflex. They are determined by various cognitive factors. So it's very interesting and important to understand that the emotions that we have, which we sometimes feel are very innate and you get it automatically, are in fact quite thought about. So for example, this is one question that we'll be addressing in this POPR. That's why I put it here. Is the an example is the anxiety fear you have near a robot. So when you are near a robot and it's moving around you, you feel some anxiety in the sense that it will collide with you. So it's basically some collision anxiety. The question is, why do you feel that? So if you think why you feel it, is it because of the robot is metallic? Is it because the robot is very fast? In fact, it's not true, because you can stand near a fan which is very fast and you will not be as afraid. It is actually now well known, and we have worked on this as well, that what is actually important that instigates this anxiety or fear is the predictability. So if there's a system that is, even if it's fast, if it's predictable, it's less frightening for you than if it's not predictable. But the point is, it doesn't end here. Basically, this shows that your brain is actually thinking about looking at a behavior and also thinking about how predictable it is before it generates the fear of anxiety. But it doesn't end here. So imagine a scenario where there is a robot coming towards you and you're afraid. And just imagine if this is the same robot and there's coming towards you and there's a wall behind you. So you will understand that you'll be more afraid in this scenario, because you're not just thinking about the fact that the robot may hit you. You are in fact also thinking about if the robot may come really close to me, if I'll be able to escape this place. And similarly, it also depends on you also in fact think about the cost of impact. So you'll be afraid of a robot that comes close to your face compared to a robot that comes close to your leg. My point being that when you actually feel this fear, in fact, even though we feel that it is coming very automatically, our brain is thinking about so many things. It's thinking about what the robot will do next. In case if the robot does something bad, would I be able to escape? Is thinking about, if I'm not able to escape and if there is an impact, what will be the cost to me? And our fear is actually the emotion of fear or anxiety is actually determined by all these things. So there's a huge cognitive element. And if there is a cognitive element, then how do we have this cognitive element? Then we come to this concept of belief and context. So normally, all the cognitive factors that we experience are relative to some beliefs and experiences that we had, and which in engineering can be called as models. So, for example, suppose you are in a forest and you encounter Pikachu. So the question is, should you be afraid of Pikachu? So what emotion should you generate when you look at Pikachu? So what our brain would think is that it would normally try to for determining the cognitive factors which would determine the emotion, it will try to choose a belief and a model to use as a reference. So usually it can say, okay, I've seen a tiger before, I've seen a cat before, I've seen a rabbit before. Well, Pikachu I've not seen, but what probably would it be like? So maybe by the way it looks, you would say, maybe it's like a rabbit. So which would mean that you would say, okay, it'll behave like a rabbit. It's not so dangerous. But then, if Pikachu turns out to be something very different than you imagine, then it leads to a huge what is called prediction error. Sometimes in engineering, it leads to surprise and fear. So basically, your what it means is that your emotion, the cognitive part of it at least, is determined a lot by what you chose as a model to look at Pikachu. If you had taken the model of the tiger instead to compare Pikachu with, then maybe you would have been afraid a bit in the beginning. But when you really see the scary Pikachu, you wouldn't be that surprised and you wouldn't be that afraid. So the question is, can a better model choice lead to a pre-preparation and thus, well, let's say better emotions or lesser bad emotions? So that brings us back to our first question, saying, how should robots behave, or how should robots look like? Sorry. So normally, this is what I started with, saying that should a robot really look like a human? I mean, should it is it really bad for a robot to make errors when when we say errors, it's normally human. We are already comparing to humans, and the question is it really bad? Because if not, maybe we will assign a robot. If we think that the robot is very close to a human, it's quite possible that you will believe that it will be very human like and smart and safe. And if it makes errors, then it leads to some emotions that you don't like. On the other hand, if we can somehow make the person believe that the robot is not like a human, it's more like a monkey which makes errors in scenarios, maybe it can lead to better emotions. So what we come to here is uh, a question that, if you when a person meets a robot, how should it behave? How can we make the human choose the right model to assign to this, or rather right belief, let me say, to assign to this robot, so that later you will feel that it's not really. I think the question is, by doing this, can we have better emotions when later the robot makes a mistake in quotes, or does something that was not expected. So yeah, so it's actually a question of model choice, and this is what we want to make a discussion about. And so before I go to the so from there, I want to go to the so what. So I talked about the engineering side of human machine interactions. We talked about how these interactions lead to some emotions. What are these emotions? Why are these there? How can this be measured? And how can these be controlled by, or can they be controlled by the control of the beliefs, or rather the models? And the question is, from all this, so what for the robot, what should the robots do, and what does it mean? So here, um, I will pass it on to Lionel, who will talk about what does happen when there are errors by robots or not, and and he will talk about the observations he has from the various social settings. So Lionel, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Ganesh. So the first part was relying upon psychological and neuroscience models, and they are really robust, and they give really key elements for the understanding of emotions and robots in a given context. What I try to bring here is the cultural and the social factors that create some kind of modulation, that create some kind of variety in the human attitude when there are variety in robots' attitude. So the focus was on robots' failure. This is really important to note that most of the social robotics insist on the fact that robots are supposed to be robust and supposed to be computing machine with the expected attitudes, and they try to frame the best robot for the best task to comply with, and so on. And the successfulness of robots is not something that we witness in every case, in any case. And the emotions and reaction of humans in a given context leads to think about the epistemological status of failure. Means that most of the time failure is considered on the side of robotics and let's say engineering at large, but this is a starting discussion with Ganesh, as a rupture. This is a rupture in the computing system, or this is a bug, or this is a glitch or something that doesn't work. And this is also a rupture and a sign that the technological robustness is not as sophisticated as we imagine. And of course, it is a rupture of meaning, means that the expectation of the human brain and the human people there in front of robots is challenged by the fact that the robot doesn't behave the way it should. And then this leads robots and robotics to work not according to the models that we have in mind and that Ganesh explained clearly previously. So my question is, many observations in many contexts in which I witness recorded attitudes of human in front of robots behaving not exactly the way they were supposed to behave. So what is failure? Was something more than failure? Means that was it something like a witness or a revelator or something else? And the possibility to allocate new meanings and to give rise to a very specific and complex set of emotions, not exactly a contestation, not exactly against the models that neuroscience have been discussed previously by Ganesh, but as a follow-up and in a given context with the complexity of reality of a robot and a human, or many robots and many humans, we can see that beyond the enabling of emotions, how they are expressed and how they bring together sense of complexity. So I will rely on ethnographic vignettes taken from my research from recent years in the wild, in even society, in streets, for instance, in restaurants and so on. And of course in the lab, because I've been conducting some research in laboratories to compare the attitudes of people that are supposed to be familiar with robots and people that are supposed not to be and have not always different reactions. Can we shift to the next one, Ganesh?
Yes.
So let's get back to emotions and robots and emotion in the field of anthropology, means in the context of social and cultural perspective on robots and humans. So there was a wide range of emotion that like Ganesh has demonstrated previously, but the important for anthropology is that, of course, emotions have a psychological basis. They are grounded in the brain, but they are socially expressed and shared, and they are culturally framed and, most important, modulated depending on the context. Here in China, for instance, where I am, the expression of people in front of robots is not exactly different, but not exactly the same than in France, than in the UK or United States, or whatever the place. And this is exactly what is interesting for anthropology, is the modulation and the combination of these attitudes towards robot, emotional attitudes, but also bodily attitude and so on. So I think that it's important also to take into account the fact that has been underscored by Ganesh previously. Humans are different and our robots are different. So the set of possible interaction are of course is of course really large, and the human robot interaction are all but simple. We have models, we have hypotheses, we have concepts, but we have to record specifically in a given experimental or in the wild context or ethnographic context what's happening really in fact. And each time we record a complex combination of percepts, affects, mental process associated to robots. So my ethnographic accounts on emotion rely upon a specific material, bodily posture, gesture, the way people react when they see a robot. They can stop starting, freezing, so on. Paralinguistic expression, face attitude, eyes movement like that, or I look at the robot, I look somewhere else, I look directly into the robot, I take my distance and so on. So this is really important for us to understand that all these elements are also language, a language of human. And of course, the expressive expression add to the material that are used here. How do people feel and how do they express how they feel? Next slide, please. So robots can have strange attitudes. For instance, we all know that our brains are trained to have anthropologic projection of robots and have empathy, artificial empathy, and we rely upon the mimesis with robots, especially when they are human-like humanoid robots. But see, for instance, these two paper looks like they are sleeping, and we don't know exactly how to react in front of this robot because we don't know if they are dead. We don't know if they sleep. We don't know if we disturb them. And then, of course, there is certain kind of expectation. But most of the time, a paper is supposed to interact, is plugged, and there is an electricity and a language expressed by the arms, the body, and of course the language of the robot. And then we don't know always how to react in front of robot that doesn't react the way we are supposed to think about this. Means that the anticipation and expectation can be also the source of surprise, and this is really important to underscore the issue of surprise. And there is a huge body of literature on robot emotional, psychological, and social impacts on human, of course. But the interest here lies in the given context of this crazy robot that have been broadcast everywhere in the world, this crazy robot in a kitchen, public kitchen in a restaurant that start shaking the arms all the way long, and the people had to run after it and throw it on the ground just to stop the crazy robot. But we can on this ground divide into two different attitudes of robots. Some robots can accidentally have unexpected behaviors, but more and more social robotics are interested in intentional unexpected behavior. For instance, when the robots say bad words, for instance, when they have a bad reaction. And there are many articles right now that try to record the human reaction. For instance, when the robot say bad words like fuck you, or they swear, and so on. Next one. And these strange attitudes, even when robots are quiet and express social attitudes, these strange attitudes are mirror of human strange attitude. For instance, most of the time we think that, okay, people are rational, and if you see friendly robots, they have a friendly reaction. But in my field work, here on the left, you will see a young guy trying to hit a friendly robot in a museum in Shenzhen in South China. And the robot was just trying to have friendly relationship. He was singing. He was getting close to the boy, and the boy is trying to hit the robot against the wall. So what's all about? If the robots acts like a human, then the guy try to hit the robots. That means that this is the human that acted strangely. And the second one is okay. You see that a teenage girl is doing a very bad gesture against Ishigo robots in the Miraikan museum in Tokyo. Actually, the gesture, you know it, means fuck off in linguistic terms. And this bad behavior is motivated by we don't know what exactly, because the robot is very distant and is in prison, so there is a security distance in between the humans and the robot. But she feels like she wants to be aggressive against the robot, and not directly. She doesn't want to hit the robot, but she wants to express anger against the robot for a reason that I still do not understand right now. I have an idea, but I won't tell now. Ganesh, please, can you shift toward the next one? Okay, and getting back to our first discussion, anxiety, there are anthropological approach to emotion, of course, anxiety. I would like to underscore the fact that a distinction can be made in between social anxiety, for instance, on the ideological level, when people have dystopian ideas about technology or techno-skepticism, and said, okay, we are surrounded by machine, and the future will be machine everywhere, and they will replace us, and they will control us, and so on. So this is what we call social anxieties. It's something that you can share, even if you do not have a bad experience with a machine. Then you can fear the artificial intelligence spread around our computers and smartphones and so on. And this relates only partially to psychological anxiety that is raising in direct contact with a robot or with a machine. And there are some works and scientific records that robot anxiety is context dependent, and in context, not only the empirical context, not only the experimental context, but also cultural and national variation. Here is an example. I will not get into details. We do not have time enough. Of course, this is depending also in the context of use. If you are working with a robot in a enterprise, for instance, or in a lab, or in a hospital, and so on, then there are some different frame for use. And of course, it comes to the issue of safety, reliability. If you have a robot for leisure or entertainment, the robot is supposed to fulfill some different aims. It's supposed to amuse people. It's supposed to be entertaining. It's not to comply task. Company robots also are able to maintain communication with humans, but we do not expect more than this, and sometimes more than sometimes they act according to strange behaviors. So it also depending on the third factor. This is the digital literacy or familiarity with machines. And for instance, this example is really interesting. It has been recorded in ISIR, a famous laboratory in the PEPR, Institut des Systèmes Intelligents et de Robotique, where they were using this Jaco, but the Jaco is a robotic arm, but it was not utterly efficient, and it was moving all around. And the engineers were really quiet in front of this very strange behavior, whereas all the non-roboticists were a bit frightened by what was happening. So there is a striking difference in between people that are expecting that the robot could behave not according to the computing system, and those who do not expect this. Next slide, please. And robot failure is not a source of anxiety only, but also of disappointment, and to my surprise, indifference. These have been recorded. There are two vignettes that have been recorded in different contexts. The first one is the Cité des Sciences in Paris, and Pepper and Nao are in cage. They are in prison. They are distant from the people, and people are supposed to react with the robot, to interact with the robot and ask questions. Expect for interaction, expect for response, but most of the time, the Pepper and the Nao do not react at all, because there is too much noise, and they are not really efficient at the time, or there is computing rupture and something like that. All that can happen at it. So people said, okay, then the robot doesn't react as it was supposed to react, and then okay, we turn the back and we shift toward another one. So in the wild, when you observe people reacting towards robots, you can get close to robot and be attracted to robot, fascinated by the robot, and expect that something a bit magic, a bit strange, a bit astonishing will happen. But okay, if nothing happens, then no direct anxiety, no direct deep feelings, but just, okay, this is a machine, it doesn't work, and I'm running away. I'm not running away, but I'm turning my back. And the other one is a mall in Shenzhen, China, where there are these service robots, and there were some kids celebrating a birthday, and they were shouting, they were dancing, they were singing, and so on. And the service robot was in between the people, roaming in between the people, and was really crazy, and was hitting the chairs and was hitting the table, but nobody cared. about that. I was the only one to take pictures and said, okay, look what's happening. It's hitting the furniture, but it can hit the people. But people were so familiar with the presence of the robots, it doesn't look like a surprise to them, even for the youngest one. And even the mothers that were surrounding them were not afraid of what's happening, because this is so common to have a crazy robot in the house. So in the house, I mean, in this kind of rooms. So these are some key elements, in my opinion, to have a complex reflection about all these very specific situation in which then the expression or the control of emotion is socially and culturally shaped and framed. Ganesh, please, next one. And the issue of strange behavior of robots, of course, leads to the unescapable discussion on the uncanny valley. And most of the time, people discuss the origin of these feelings of the uncanny, the variations of the uncanny, and the limits of the model, and say, okay, Maury was really keen on framing a very interesting model, but blah, 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 and so on. And most of the research, of course, focus on the impacts and address the question whether the uncanny is an obstacle to the robot appropriation or a kind of reluctance toward robots. But see that anthropologists, Vidal, Grimaud, and now myself, are keen on proposing an alternative theory, which is, can it be an ingredient for the human appeal to robots? I mean, when you have a very strange feeling and you see a robot that is really strange in shape, in attitudes, or in context, the robot is there and it was not supposed to be there, then you have a mix in between fear and fascination in the same time. And you say, okay, this is a source of anxiety, but I want to be close to the robot. I want to test the robot. And I want to feel exactly what's all about. And this is a mix in between two contrasting emotion and two contrasting feelings. So anxiety is, of course, not only a matter of action, a behavior pattern. And for instance, when I was in Hindenburg doing some field work and addressing questions to roboticists, one of them told me, okay, this one in PAL robotics is a very strange robot. It's RIM is the entitled RIM, and when you turn it on, then the eyes shine blue, and this is pretty frightening, he said. But he was laughing when he told me that it was about anxiety and fear. So talking about emotions can bring another layer of complexity about the story of fear and fascination. Next one, please. And this is what I observed very recently. This was broadcast worldwide. The humanoid robots marathon. Actually, I was there. These are my pictures. And a lot of people in China, in Beijing, in the south of Beijing, enjoying the race and supporting robots. And they said, shouting like that. They said, okay, okay. Go robot, hey robot, talk to me robot, and so on. And they were supporting, just like the kind of empathic relationship to robots, and talking to them just like they were persons. And of course, robots are not always successful, and many of them fail, and many of them fall on the floor. And these falling robots were really important elements to understand the modulation of emotion I'm talking about, because there were mixed feelings. When a humanoid robot is running and now is falling, people say, first they were surprised like that, to say, okay, what's happening? And then they had fun. People were laughing. And finally, when they see that the robot was on the ground, this kind of empathy, they were a bit sad. And after, when the robot was withdrawn from the road, because there were other robots coming after them, and people said, okay, this is just a machine. And in a few seconds, in a few minutes, you have a mix in between very different feelings and very contrasted attitudes towards robots: surprise, fun, empathy, distance, and of course, not always neither anxiety nor disappointment. Next one, please, Ganesh.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. And this leads me, we are perfectly in time to the ongoing discussion that we started with Ganesh, and I think that there will be fruitful conclusion to these opening, let's say, grounds to the confrontation and mix in between neuroscientists and anthropological perspective on the emotion of robots. These very small ethnographic accounts leads me to a couple of conclusions. First, there is a complex and ambivalent human emotions toward robots. This is not simple, neither simple nor very easy to read, very easy to understand, since they are also, let's say, mixing together different kind of feelings in the wide range of possible emotion in terms of the model that Ganesh have displayed previously. Second, considering not only the varieties of emotion and feelings, but these modulation and these arrangements, there are some ambivalent and antagonistic feelings. There are fear and attraction, empathy and distance, and so on. And so we have to take into account the context and the possibility to have different resources to have this adaptation reaction that Ganesh talked about previously. My idea, but I'm not the only one, but this is something I support on the grounds of these ethnographic accounts, is the emotion related to strangeness of robot and anxiety can be indirectly a source of trust and attachment to robots because they look like humans. And of course, this is the theoretical conclusion. Following anthropological research and recent orientation in social robotics, then robots are not perfect. But if we consider robots are mirror of humans, we are not perfect either. And then imperfection of robots, their failure, their mistake, and so on, make them closer to humans that we imagine. Because us human, we do not consider ourselves as perfect. And nobody's perfect, said the movies, right? So human-robot interaction compels to the reinjection of complexity first of human behavior, considering the degree of uncertainty of our psychoaffective reaction from a second to another. We can be really nice people and we can be nasty people and we can be very frightening people. And then if we consider that the robot is a certain kind of let's say, time and again, a mirror of the human in behavior, then we have to consider seriously that it can be also a source of mistake. All right. I think I ended up with my part, and I think it's not the global conclusion, but start for a common ground for conclusion.
Yeah, so thank you very much to Ganesh and Lionel for this presentation. So I have a question because I apparently am the only one audience right now. So could it be that it's like anything you present to a baby? So could it be that to avoid fear or untrust towards robots, we should start at a very early age? So that you grow up with robots and you are used to having them and then less fearing them?
So can I start maybe? So basically, from the engineering perspective or the let's say computational neuroscience perspective, you're right. I mean, how it's described is just by the fact that again, we talk of beliefs and in the technical terms models, is that if you give more exposure to the baby of a robot to a robot, then right from the beginning you start making models of it. You have a better idea of what the robot can do, what it will do, and if you have that, then whatever happens is less surprise because you know that this is how it works, and you would like it more. You'll be more comfortable with it. So, and this you can see a lot. This you can see because if you are living in the Amazon, I don't know, a baby in Amazon who grew up with some snakes and lizard, they will not be so scared compared to you because even if they are scary, they know, they have a understanding of, what they can do and what they cannot do, and in which scenarios they are scary and they should be scared, and which scenarios not. While you've seen it on the TV, but you don't have a practical experience, you have less experience, you will be scared. So yes, this is from engineering neuroscience perspective, it's absolutely true. So the more exposure you have, you will be less surprised, and you less scared of agent. Yeah. Or at least you will know at what instance you should be scared of it, and what when not.
Mhm.
For the social sciences, I totally agree. And also, this is supported by social programs. I mean that in the examples I brought for this presentation, most of the examples are taken from Asian countries, and you know that the engineering and social programs about robotics are really keen on making all the people giving access to the robots very, very, very young, and you can see in the streets very young people starting to control robots as toys first, and there are a lot of possibilities to find a robot in markets, for instance. Very different kind of robots, very cheap ones. Some are complex, some are really simple, but this is kind of familiarization to robots that is supported time and again by social and economic programs, because we are in the robotic race, global robotic race. And of course, this is beyond culture, this is beyond psychology, this is also the politics of this program.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I suppose I could have more, but I'm just I really like the Pikachu image that because Pokemon is so well known around the world now that you could not imagine that Pikachu is turning very bad and very aggressive. So I really like this counter example, and it's I don't know if you've seen that, but apparently also on LinkedIn they are showing some videos of humanoids. I think the one of Unitrees coming very closely and quickly to people, especially on a moped, on a scooter, and so people are just very afraid because they cannot expect what they are doing, and so they are just leaving the scooter, and they are afraid that something bad will happen to them. And yeah, it's I did not really understand what was the goal of this video showing that, because I mean there are already so many people afraid of robots, and I was a bit surprised that it should be maybe something like a gag, and it's maybe like fun. But I fear that it's doing the contrary, that people could be even more afraid now of robots.
Sometimes, it's not just robots, because you mentioned roads. You have a similar thing with automated vehicles, for example, automated cars, which are like robots, basically.
Yeah.
And
this is even more frightening.
Yeah, and this is quite frightening. It can really kill you, and it has killed people. But sometimes, you are also somehow forced by the laws of the country, because it's frightening more for uh, you know uh, because you will not see any fully automated vehicle in Europe, but you do see it in the US and in China. So
Okay.
is it because the people there are less scared? Sometimes not. Sometimes the government forces you to experience them, and you don't know. Sometimes I don't know which is good or bad, because in that case, like you said, you make a model of the robot when you're from a baby. When the government forces you to experience it, then you realize, okay, it's not so scary. They are okay, they kill sometimes, but they're okay. And then people start accepting them. While in Europe, because the government doesn't allow it, we remain scared, and we don't expect them accept them. So I'm not saying which way is good or bad. Maybe it's better the Europe way, because they are still actually killing some pedestrians sometimes, but even that sometimes is quite not very right. So it's interesting, the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what I call the social modulation of emotions. You know,
Yeah.
we have basic emotion and say, okay, I fear this machine, I fear this robot, I fear this computing program, avatar, AA avatar, and so on. But if you are forced to use it by the society in which you are raised, by the society, and say, okay, no, I don't have a smartphone, but so I'm a kind of a stranger in my own country if I am not connected, then your feelings and your attitudes and you know, that have been interiorized by socialization patterns force you to have these mechanics and these materials into your body and in your ordinary life. So that makes a striking difference in between countries, but not because the brain of the people are different, but because only the social context prioritize some very specific type of interaction with machines or not.
So to force the interaction, it's force your brain adaptation, or
Yes.
it forces you to be more tolerant to different or unexpected behaviors, or both.
No, of course, society has a social control of the brain activity. That's my views, but maybe
Okay.
Ganesh is
My view is that you know, experience leads to more self-related feelings, so like fear, and it'll get better because with experience you understand the thing better. But when it comes to tolerance, it's more a social thing, and that I think is not from experience, it's just enforced to us by the society.
Okay.
No, it's nothing. You can experience, I don't know, other races, doesn't mean that you'll become more tolerant. It's, you have to be exposed, and then somebody has to say, look, you're supposed to be tolerant, and that's what makes you tolerant. So I think the tolerance part is more imposed, um, um, uh, imposed, while because all these social feelings are kind of imposed, I think.
Yeah, but the experience is not always key to these kind of emotions. For instance, you can be a racist without experiencing any kind of problem with foreign people. You know, just
I
because
agree.
you have this in mind, and if you do not experience, but okay, your neighbor has not exactly the same skin color, but okay, I'm afraid of my neighbor, even if it's the smartest guy and the nicest guy.
Yeah, but the problem is that, you know, the problem is, like you said, you know, you are afraid. The racist part, racist is a difficult term, there are many
Yeah, of
aspects,
course.
but when it comes to basic fears, like when you said afraid of the other person, you're, that you can be afraid, you are afraid of the other person when you have not seen people, so many people like that. It's a lack of experience. So I mean, it's, I think it's quite normal for people to, for example, it's difficult to say without saying something, you know, politically incorrect, but
We don't
you
care
know,
you
if,
are in France.
yeah,
You can go.
if you meet people who look different than you, it's a normal reaction, I think, from our system to be afraid of them, because you don't know, you know that they're human, so there are some things that are okay, but on the other hand, you don't know some things. You, the first time you see somebody who looks so big, for example, you'll be afraid, even though he may be a very gentle giant and very nice person, but just because it's different from what you have experienced, you have these personal emotions that are generated by your lack of experience. But when I say lack of experience, there are two kinds, huh? You may have a lack of personal experience, but you may have experienced information about them before, so as in somebody told you this, or you saw a book. This can of course influence it, so influence it as well. But yeah, but when it comes to social things, that you, what we say, that, you know, you should be tolerant, you feel less, yeah, it's complicated, but I think there is a lot of these things, and the social things, they change with time, the time and culture, time and place. It's a spatio-temporal thing, you know.
And
So
because you talked about color, so do you think that there's a different reaction when the robot is dark, or if the robot is rather right, or?
So I suggest a very interesting reading of a very interesting paper that has just published in the Journal of Multimodal Use and Interaction. This is my paper, actually,
Yeah, okay.
on race and robots, and this is a critical rejoinder of the issue of racism and robots, you know, because there are some roboticists that said that, okay, people, robots are too white to mirror the social diversity and so on. So I had a very critical rejoinder against this. So I advise you, without selfishness, I advise you to have a glance at it, and I will send to you and anyone that is inspired by this reflection after viewing this video.